because it's a lot of intro for the heart. Okay, so we've been talking about where the heart is, and it is in the chest or the thoracic cavity of the body. It is located directly superior to the diaphragm, and it hops in between the lungs, which are just not shown here. One of the things that you might notice as an important landmark is that the sternum actually sits, the sternum and manubrium sit right above the heart as well. So some folks, if they end up having to apply like life-saving cardiac measures, sometimes they have to push on the chest, and whilst that is happening, sometimes there might be fractures or issues because that sternum is in the way, protecting the heart from being saved in that particular instance. Anyway, what's kind of interesting is this. There it is. This is kind of a cool cut, actually. So in this particular cut, you can see the back and the front. Like up here's the front, up here's the back. Well, I guess I should say back here is the back, right? And right here is the spinal column that's coming right through. Okay. Other things you can actually see part of the aorta and the blood vessels coming up, right? Vena cava coming up, and they're going to sit up at the top part of the heart. You can also see a cross section of something that's really important to think about. This part of the heart has a lot of muscle. So some parts of the heart are really thick and strong. Those are typically a part called the ventricles. They're the real heavy lifters. There's other parts of the heart that have this like thin, like kind of almost, it's muscle, but it's almost like flapping in a lot of ways. We'll learn about that in a little bit. And they're usually part of what we call the aorta and the atrium. And they kind of give this flexibility to allow blood to enter and like open up big in order to do that. And then in here, this is the chamber where there's actually blood. And so what is important to think about is that this chamber is lined by almost like a plasticky type of fibrous coating. So the blood like slips through just like it would be slipping through like a plastic pipe or like a plastic bag. Okay. Okay. So pericardium we talked about in the last video. So that is peri, meaning it's not quite the heart, but it's like sort of close to it. And that cardium means the heart. It's a double-walled sac, kind of like if you were to fold over a big, huge, like, you know those Ziploc bags that you can store comforters and stuff in? They're super huge. Like one of those with just a couple, maybe like a 2 liters of water. And you could fold it over, and like there's this kind of double layer wall, and then in between those two walls, I'm like showing you guys with my hands, and then you guys can't see my hands, right? So like just imagine here's like this baggie, right? Like this is a Ziploc baggie or something. So here's like this is for saying, and there's water in it. There's fluid, and that's actually, you know, serosa fluid. Okay, the fluid of the serosa. And that protects the heart because, you know, remember the lungs are like breathing, they're expanding and contracting, and the heart is like beating, and we don't want those organs rubbing up against each other. We're protecting it from friction and the wear and tear that goes along with becoming frictiony with other types of organs. It's nice because it expands, but it also resists excessive expansion, meaning that it kind of helps the heart hold its shape. It's anchored firmly to the diaphragm. I think I have this picture. Hold on, it's like way back here. Boop, 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 boop. Oh, no, there it is. Okay, there it is. Doop, there's the anchor point right here. Okay, that's like nice. We're connected. There we go. Okay. Okay, so the fibrous pericardium is actually really, really thick, which is why we call it the fibrous. It's like if you were to cut and dissect out a heart, let me tell you, the one thing you got to get through is the super thick fibrous pericardium, and first you'll start with the fiber strokes on your scalpel, and then by the time you're done, you've got the scissors out, full-blown scissors, just cut through it. So serous, referring to the serosa, the parietal layer versus the visceral layer. So like the visceral layer is the part that's actually like, can you give me the color? Is that like a possibility? Yes, pink. So the visceral layer is going to be like the part that's going to be lining, like right here by the actual organ, right? And then hold on, let me get another highlighter color. So, yes, blue. right? So the parietal layer is going to be the one that's on the outside, right? So it's way out on the outside. So that is the difference between those layers. And I think I'm going to get my pen back. The pericardial space itself doesn't have a whole lot, like 5 to 30 milliliters of pericardial fluid, like a shot glass or two worth of pericardial fluid, very small. And then we talked about pericarditis, which is like inflammation of the membranes of the heart, but not usually the heart itself specifically, right? Okay, so let's take a look at some of the other outside wall stuff. The heart really has to be anchored in. So as you can see, all these like teeny tiny little collagen fibers primarily, cross-linked in, keeping the heart shape, protecting it as well. I think we pretty much talked about this. Pericardial cavity, yep. We talked about thrombus, pericardium, serosa, parietal layer, the variable layer. Oh, right. The visceral layer is also known as the epicardium. It like actually goes just right on top of the epi, meaning outside, above, right, of the heart. The myocardium, the endocardium, and the epicardium. Let's talk about those really quick. So the myocardium is means muscle, and so that's the meaty part. That is the muscly meaty part of the heart. As you can see here, there's like a lot of it. In this case, it's part of a ventricle, so of course there's like tons. The endocardium is so crazy. It's really neat because if you can see here, it's like this really thin pinky line, and it kind of changes color, super smooth. It's like, it feels like the inside of a baggie or something plastic. It's very plasticized, and that's so that when blood comes into the heart, it doesn't get soaked up by the meaty part. Because have you ever marinated a steak? Because it's going to absorb a lot of, especially salty, if you know marinades, it's going to absorb that fluid big time. And so that's exactly what would happen if you had not had this endocardium here. So it would soak up a lot of the plasma of the blood, and then it would cause massive clot, and then it would move around, and problem. You can see that. And then epicardium surrounding the outside of the heart, right? Okay. So things you should be able to do for the most part for gross anatomy, which is the big anatomy of the heart. So describe those three layers of the heart wall. We talked about myocardium, epicardium, endocardium. Like those are the ones. The four chambers of the heart, those are going to be the atria and the ventricles, and the AZs, which we'll look at soon. We haven't covered those yet. We'll look at some of the surface features of the heart, which we kind of did already. And we're going to talk about the fact that it's a four-chambered heart, right? Which goes back to this atrium-ventricle situation. So just keep in mind those are all together. You'll be able to identify the valves of the heart, which are the doors that open and close between the atria and the ventricles. All keep the blood moving, but also keep the blood waiting. It's turn. We'll move to the next one. What's next is you'll trace the blood through the chambers of the heart, and then also, like through the lungs, and back into the heart, and then out to the body, and then back into the heart, and then back to the heart, and then through the lungs, all that stuff. So we'll do the circuits, really, is kind of what's important for that. And then there are some of the arteries and veins that nourish not only the myocardium, when we talked about those tiny little blood vessels on the surface of the heart, like just because you have blood flowing through the heart, because of that endocardium being all like plastic, you can't absorb blood that way. So you rely on these like little tiny blood vessels on the surface of the heart, right? The coronary vessels. Okay. Cadaver heart. All right, I'm gonna pause here, and because this is a whole different ballgame. And let's pick this up in part 3. And in the meantime, I hope this was a super helpful video, and I hope you're having a wonderful day.